Washington should bring Jayden Limar home from Oregon in the transfer portal. Let me tell you why.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. And today's episode is brought to you by Rugiet. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to rugiet.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugiet ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready. And just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, please make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well, so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio-only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the show out a lot. Now, I got a really fun show coming at all you everydayers. We're going to be joined by Nick Arvin of On Boilermakers. We did a little bit of a crossover. You'll get to that in a little bit to discuss Washington's matchup with number 5 Purdue today on Wednesday. Again, we'll get to that later on because the transfer portal is still buzzing. Washington has gotten a handful of commitments already with punter Hunter Green, offensive lineman Colt Dietrich, and defensive lineman Deshaun Watts already. So who's next? I think it should be Oregon running back Jayden Limar. And this is a really interesting case where this is a guy, former 4-star recruit from Lake Stevens High School here in Washington a couple of years ago. And I think he is the perfect stopgap running back for what Washington is looking for in the 2026 season. He's got 1 year of eligibility remaining after playing the first 3 at Oregon, where he was able to rack up 442 yards on the ground with 4 touchdowns, averaging 4.7 yards per carry, which is more than solid enough for what you're looking for a guy who is just going to come in and be part of a committee. What's more important than that, he is someone who can help out as a pass catcher out of the backfield. He's got 20 career receptions for 207 yards and a touchdown. And even more importantly than that, in my opinion, he is a really good pass blocker. And that's one of those things that I've been highlighting. And I know Scotty Graham, Washington's running backs coach, has certainly emphasized throughout his entire career. It's something that Jonah Coleman was one of the best at in the country throughout his entire career, especially once he got here to Washington. And that was one of the reasons that he developed into the star that he did and why Washington would never take him off the field, because he was a really good pass blocker. And for one season, Jayden Limar is exactly what you're looking for in that regard. And I think that especially with the news of Adam Mohammed transferring to Cal, where that situation kind of is what it is at this point, where it seemed like he left to go after whatever was going to be the biggest and best offer for him. And I think that Cal can certainly be a solid landing spot for him when you look at the fact that there were visits to Texas A&M and visits to Florida lined up. It felt like he was aiming even higher than that, and to go from the Big Ten to the ACC certainly feels like a bit of a downgrade, where, especially when you look at what he could have been in this rotation, that he would have been a really solid addition, or not really solid addition. We all know what he would have been here at Washington. He would have been one of the most touted backs in the Big Ten, but that's not going to be the case anymore. And I think with where he wound up, Washington fans should feel really confident in what this running back room looks like, because if you're able to add a guy like Jayden Limar to this group as well, it's something I talked about on yesterday's show. As you everydayers know, if you can add somebody who's just going to give you somewhere between 100 and 120 touches and just be really efficient, somebody who can come in, know the offense, do the little things right, like pass blocking, which is something that Adam Mohammed did struggle with over his career at Washington, that's going to be more than enough, because you've got Jordan Washington in the room, who's somebody I expect to take a big step forward in his 3rd year on campus. Brian Bonner is somebody who is going to come in and contribute in some regard. We all know what Damon Williams can do with his legs, and he's probably going to have a very similar amount of touches that he did in 2025 when you consider what his carries looked like. And then that still leaves room for somebody else to come in and contribute, whether it be a Quade Carr, a Julian McMahon, an Ansu Sanoe, whoever that you feel that other guy might be. There is plenty of room for that, where I feel like Ansu Sanoe is a guy that you certainly shouldn't sleep on in that regard because of his size, his physicality, where Matt Doherty came on and said it on this podcast that he is somewhere close to 235 pounds right now. And that's one of those things where if you need a bruising back in short yardage situations, he's probably the guy that I think that Washington is going to turn to. And that's another reason why I would feel really comfortable with the addition of a Jayden Limar. This is somebody who has experienced a whole bunch in Big Ten play, where I'm sure there are people out there who are saying like, hey, this is somebody who got passed up at Oregon for a whole bunch of true freshmen. Why would you want to bring a guy like that back? And it goes so far beyond that, in my opinion, because this is a guy who, if you add him again, it is a short-term addition where he's someone who can show a lot of these younger guys the ropes and help them pick up on some of the intricacies of the offense. Even though he is just learning it himself, it's very clear from how the Ducks trust him over his time there and putting him on the field so much as a true freshman that Washington would have no doubt that he can pick up their offense very, very quickly. And I think that's a really important factor in all of this, because you just need that veteran experience in somebody who is not going to necessarily block the room long-term. And I think that you would have had a really nice backfield between Adam Mohammed, Jordan Washington, and Brian Bonner if Mohammed were to stay around. But with a guy like Jayden Limar in the room, it doesn't necessarily negate any of that. And I think that the efficiency numbers could certainly be very similar if you were to wind up at Washington, with how this Husky offense likes to run the ball and just how he fits into that scheme from things that we saw from Jonah Coleman this past season. Obviously, he's not the physical specimen that Jonah is, but that's unfair because nobody is. And with a guy like Adam Mohammed, I feel like with some of the stuff they were running for Adam outside the tackle box, that Jayden Limar could thrive in that regard as well. And with the vision that he's shown throughout his time at Oregon, again, going back to 4.7 yards per carry, I feel like those are the kinds of numbers that can really stand out and really benefit Washington in the 2026 season. So that's something I'm really, really curious about. But another guy who I wanted to make sure I highlighted, because this is something that popped up on social media through his NIL agency, is former four-star recruit Sterling Sanders from Boston College. This is a guy I'm really curious about because I reached out to some sources, and I don't think that this is somebody who is on the top of Washington's priority list right now from what I've been told. But if this is somebody that, let's say, a couple dominoes fall and they don't wind up going UW's way, I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just saying that there is a hypothetical world where things like that happen, because that's what the transfer portal is. I think that Sterling Sanders is somebody that Washington might wind up considering at some point down the road, because you've got the upside from a four-star recruit from South Carolina, and Washington has shown that they are willing to go out there and consider guys that don't have production in the right system. Because you go and you look at Dante Simpson, who's set to take an official visit to UW at some point over the next week or so. That guy perfectly fits the mold, where he's got 3 years of eligibility remaining, and Sterling Sanders would have 4 because he only played one game at Boston College this past season. Again, it all comes back to you are trying to reload the depth of the room. I know I talked about this on the bonus show, and a lot of you everydayers know that, but that is such an important factor in all of this, because if you feel that whether it be a guy like Sterling Sanders or a guy like Dante Simpson, whoever it might be, that they can go out and help raise the floor of this group, and you can be a little bit patient with them, and you don't necessarily have to rush them into the rotation. And it's something where if he comes in and he earns a spot, awesome. Of course you're going to be happy with that. Why wouldn't you be? But if he comes in and it's, oh, okay, yeah, we like what this guy does with this or with that, but we want to improve, just hypothetically speaking, the pass rush plan of a guy like that. And that's going to take 8 to 12 months to develop, and we're going to work on some moves and different things like that. I think that is also a very realistic outcome with one person that Washington might want to take, because again, if you go out and you're able to get an Esther Christensen and a Darren Conley to upgrade and really solidify the top end of your rotation with guys who have experience and guys who can get after the quarterback a little bit, that's great. And you think that, let's just say it's Dante Simpson in this hypothetical world, is able to come in and, you want to redshirt him, but you think that by the time that 2027 rolls around, he can be a high-end piece of your rotation. That's great. There are ways to make all of that work. And that's why I wouldn't rule out a guy like Sterling Sanders at some point down the line. I just wanted to put him on your radar. But Washington basketball has a really big game coming up. Can they pull off the upset against number 5 Purdue? Let's talk about it. Message from our good friends over at FanDuel. Fridays already feel different during basketball season, and FanDuel is making them even better. Every Friday night before the games tip off, FanDuel gives fans a new way to kick off the weekend with NBA Happy Hour. NBA Happy Hour is your official pregame, a limited time window where special offers drop right inside the FanDuel app before the action starts. Fridays from 6 to 7:30 Eastern have become appointment viewing with NBA Happy Hour. Opening the FanDuel app during Happy Hour always brings something new. Boosts, bonuses, surprises, and so much more. It's easy to check the weekly special before tip-off and make a move before the window closes. And it adds extra energy to Friday night basketball without overthinking it. So before tip-off, check the FanDuel app and see what's dropping during NBA Happy Hour. Every Friday from 6 to 7:30 p.m. Eastern. A little basketball, a little action, and a whole lot of Friday energy. That's NBA Happy Hour only on FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NBA.
I'm here today with Roman Tomashoff of Locked On Huskies, and we're talking everything about this big conference matchup coming up today. So we'll hit on all that. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Rougiette. If you've been thinking about taking that next step, now's the time. Head on over to rougiette.com/lockedoncollege to get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rougiette, ready, feel present, feel confident, feel ready. So with that being said, what's up, Roman? How are you doing today? And thanks for being on the show.
Nick, I'm great. I always love doing these crossovers.
Yeah.
And for me in particular, I know you and Purdue land are having a wonderful time talking basketball. That's something I love doing, love covering, and I'm excited to get a chance to talk about it.
Yeah, it's absolutely going to be a fun one. And these two programs definitely in different spots right now. Washington struggling a little bit as of late. Purdue really starting to hit that stride in terms of being the team we thought they could be going into this season. So we'll definitely get to Purdue throughout the course of this episode. But I do want to ask you, what are your overall thoughts on Washington right now? They lose to Indiana. That was a Sunday game. I believe they lose to Indiana. What's kind of your takeaways right now for this Washington team, where they're at and how they're going to feel going into West Lafayette on Wednesday?
Whew. I mean, that's kind of how I feel about the season so far because there is so much talent on this Washington team. But the most unfortunate part of all of this is we have not, for a single game this season, been able to see the lineup that Danny Sprinkle was coming into the year hoping that he was going to have, where right off the bat, Desmond Claude misses the first 6 weeks of the season with an ankle sprain. We haven't seen Jacob Ognisevich, one of Washington's top transfer additions from Lipscomb, who was the ASUN player of the year last year, 20 points, 8 rebounds per game. All of that has been really frustrating because Bryson Tucker misses over a month, former 5-star recruit, Indiana guy, with a sprained ankle. Hannah Steinbach missed some time with a sprained ankle. Washington was the sprained ankle capital of the world for a little while, according to Danny Sprinkle. And then on top of that, Wesley Yates suffers a broken bone in his wrist, and we don't know when he's coming back at this point in time. Lathan Somerville, Washington's backup center, is dealing with a knee injury right now. I don't think he's going to play in this game tonight. So if that doesn't tell you the story of the season so far, I really don't know what does. And the unfortunate thing is we've still seen the positives from Washington this year, where they go down to USC in December from the beginning of conference play. They're down by 18 in the second half. They come back, they win that game. So it's very clear that all the talent is there. Hannah Steinbach, 2-time Big Ten Freshman of the Week. There's so much to like about this UW team, and that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to in this game in particular, is because Purdue, obviously one of the best teams in the country, really talented, and I think Washington can challenge this team. It's just a matter, unfortunately, of which Husky team is going to show up sometimes.
Yeah, so I'm just going to cut to the chase in terms of what Purdue wants to do, and we've seen it in the past weeks. This team is a lot better when they're playing physically down low, when they're able to get the ball inside the paint to Trey Kaufman-Rent, to Oscar Clough, or even Daniel Jacobson, a 7'4" guy who comes off our bench. That's a luxury that not a whole lot of teams have, and that's what I think Purdue wants to do against Washington. What can the Huskies do to stop that interior attack of Purdue and try to limit some of the production of Purdue's bigs in this game?
So that's a really great question, because obviously Hannah Steinbach has been the main factor in everything. He's averaging a double-double this season. He's been absolutely tremendous. He's certainly on his way to being a lottery pick at this point in time. I love everything he brings to the table, but he can't do it alone. One of my favorite players on this team, and has been for a long time, has been Frank Kepnang. I don't think Purdue fans got a chance to see him in this matchup last year, if I remember correctly, because he's just been injury-plagued throughout his entire career. And the fact that he's been Washington's healthiest big man this season is certainly its own story in and of itself, but he is a tremendously impactful defender where he had 6 blocks in a game against Utah last week. He's just somebody who, whenever he's on the floor, he brings that intensity, that physicality down there in the paint that you're looking for. And then the rotation is where I have the most questions about this Husky team, because as you said, like all those names are just so familiar around the world of college basketball at this point. One guy who is certainly still new to the table that I'm very interested in is Nikola Zapina, a freshman from Serbia who came over in the middle of December and was able to enroll because of another injury that I didn't even talk about, Matty Traore, who is somebody Washington brought up from the JUCO ranks and is out for the season. He's the guy where I'm curious to see how they're going to deploy him in a game like this, because he is that stretch 4 that Danny Sprinkle has been looking for, that can play solid defense down low, that is a really impactful offensive guy at different points in time. But he's only been on campus as we record this less than a month. So I don't know how much they want to trust him in a game like this.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely going to be interesting, some of these matchups surrounding these two teams, and we'll definitely get to that here in this next segment. But I do want to ask you, coming off a loss to the Hoosiers, and for the record, I do think that this Purdue team is much better than Indiana this year, and we never want to use other games as measuring sticks. But for this example, going into Bloomington, losing that game, how does Washington rebound, or what can you look at from that game and kind of establish that this is what we do bad? If we want to go into West Lafayette and have any chance against the Boilermakers, this is what this Huskies team needs to fix.
It's about finding consistency offensively. That is the biggest thing in my opinion, because Washington brought in a whole bunch of guys that were billed individually as great 3-point shooters from the transfer portal. Kimari Peterson has had his fair share of struggles. Wesley Yates, as I mentioned, not playing in this game. Jacob Ognisevich, another guy who shot 40%, not playing in this game. So that's the biggest thing, where it's nice to see Desmond, Claude, and Zoom Diallo both be able to line him up and knock him down at different points in time. Nikola Zapina, that's one of the reasons I mentioned him, is he's a guy who loves to fire away from long range, and that's why I'm curious to see how they want to deploy him in a game like this. But that's been the biggest thing, because the defense in a game like the Indiana one, where, you know, you're able to contain Wilkerson in the first half and hold him to, I think it was 1 of 6, something like that. And then he still explodes for like 20 points in the second half. That's just really unfortunate. But that is the biggest thing, is the defense has been up and down. And Indiana, as we know, is a team that when they're hitting their threes, they're a really, really tough team to beat. But Washington just could not hold their own on the other end. And it's great when they're able to get to the rim. Desmond Claude is so good at going downhill, as is Zoom Diallo. But it's about finding other ways to score the basketball, and especially not just relying on Hannah Steinbach, which has been a big key this season.
And when I look at this Washington team, especially compared to Purdue, so Purdue, the offense is going to be what's on display this year for that team. Number 1 in KenPom in terms of efficiency. This is a team that we haven't seen in quite a while. You got Braden Smith, who just broke the assist record for the Big Ten, rather. You got those bigs who we talked about. You got Fletcher Lawyer, who's a senior, been here forever, can make down those threes. So when I look at this Washington team, I maybe am a little bit concerned about your guys' ability to contain that offense, the firepower that Purdue is going to bring. Do you feel like there's any reality to that? Do you feel like the defense may struggle? And do you feel like Washington has the ability to contain Purdue?
I feel like they have the ability, and I think it just kind of all comes down to execution, because the rotations just have been so wonky, I feel like is the best term to use, because of all these injuries. And there has never been any sense of stability just in terms of what Washington is able to roll out there. And one guy who I'm really looking at in a game like this to see what he might be able to do to just step up as a defender is Bryson Tucker. This is a guy who Danny Sprinkle has really just been, I don't want to say critical of, because he's just somebody who likes to push and likes to get the most out of him. And he's just said, this is a guy who, when he's playing at his best, when he's healthy, and it does look like he's healthy again, he's one of these fast twitch, long, lanky guys who can do so much for you on both ends of the floor, that I think he's one of the guys that I'm going to look at as a key piece in this game, because like I said, the ability is there, but the execution, the rotations have certainly been lacking at different points in time this year.
Well, we're going to talk more about this game here in the next segment. All the matchups, give a few predictions about how we foresee this going. So make sure you stick with us here on this Locked On Crossover.
Right after a message from our good friends over at Rugia, let's talk about something most men don't bring up, but absolutely should. Stress from work, money, life. It doesn't just switch off at night. And when it shows up at the worst possible time, Rugy at Ready is designed to help you take back control. Rugy at Ready is a next generation prescription treatment created to support both the brain and the body so you can feel present, confident, and ready when the moment matters. Rugy at Ready combines 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 mint that dissolves under your tongue so it absorbs fast. The science behind Rugy at Ready stands out. 3 clinically proven ingredients in 1 formula designed for both mental and physical readiness. It's easy to understand why over 150,000 men have already made the switch. If you've been thinking about taking the next step, now's the time. Head to rugiet.com/lockdowncollege. That's rugiet.com/lockdowncollege. You get 15% off your order for a limited time. Rugy at Ready. Feel present, feel confident, feel ready.
So we talked in the previous segment how this Washington team, they have talent, but just unable to put it together so far at this point in the season. And Purdue, kind of the opposite, where they're really hitting their stride in terms of being that team that we hope they were capable of being preseason. But I want to look at some of these matchups. And when I looked at this Washington team while kind of getting ready for this episode with you, I agree with you. Everyone looks at Hannes Steinbach. That's going to be the guy, the leader of this team, where he's going to be an NBA prospect going into the summer. He's going to be a guy that stuns teams. But where people don't see about this Washington squad is they actually have a really solid backcourt in terms of their production. You got Desmond Claude, who's averaging 15 points a game. You got Wesley Yates, dang near 15 points a game. And then Zoom Diallo with 14.6 this year. So when you see all those pieces in the production that this Washington backcourt is giving out, what do you think that they're going to do going into West Lafayette against a matchup in Purdue's backcourt where you see Braden Smith, that playmaker at point guard? You got Fletcher Lawyer, who can knock down a 3 ball at a very high level, and then CJ Cox, who's kind of our point of attack defender out of the backcourt. You throw him on Washington's best guard and just hope he locks him down. What do you see there?
Yeah, so the thing I'm curious, especially with Wesley Yates out of this game, is what Kimari Peterson is going to look like in this game, because we know what we're going to get from Desmond Claude and Zoom Diallo. They have been arguably the most consistent guys in the backcourt throughout the season. I would say Kimari Peterson falls into that department as well, just a little bit behind them, but because of the shooting struggles, that's where I would put him, just kind of a half step down at this point in time. The thing I'm most interested in, because like I was saying a little bit earlier, with Desmond Claude and with Zoom Diallo, we know how they like to primarily attack. They like to get downhill. They like to get to the basket. They're big, strong, physical guys who like to use that to their advantage, and they can. We saw them get to the free throw line a whole bunch in this game against Indiana. Why I wanted to highlight Kimari Peterson is for 2 reasons. One is because Danny Sprinkle will always talk about him as this guy who will always put the team first and always do whatever is needed. He's been such a reliable defender for them throughout the year. Washington had a game go to double overtime against Southern University back in November. Peterson played all 50 minutes, guarded their best player the entire time, forced him to take 27 shots. Was not efficient at all in the contest. And it's one of those things where that's just how tough this dude is. And it's so much fun to watch him perform in these kinds of big name environments, because he's a guy who is from Indiana and certainly is going to be a little rejuvenated by going home. And we saw that early on in this game against the Hoosiers too, where he knocks down a trio of 3-pointers. It's like, oh, okay, is this going to be the day he kind of snaps out of the shooting slump that we've seen him go through early on in the year? And he's one of these guys where I look at Braden Smith, and if that's the matchup we see him on defensively, I should say, I'm really curious to see how that's going to work out.
And for Purdue this year, we hit on Purdue's front court a little bit earlier in the episode, but the key to winning games this year against talented bigs like a Hannes Steinbach, where we've seen that kind of formula against Texas Tech with JT Toppin, the way you win those games is limiting their production, force Washington or whoever Purdue's playing to play through somebody else. So for Purdue, you got Trey Kaufman-Renn, Daniel Jacobson. You've also got Oscar Clough. Those are our bigs. Who does Washington have outside of Steinbach, who may be that headliner in Washington's front court?
On the defensive end, it's certainly going to be Frank Kepnang. And actually, this is a great question, Nick, because one of the things that I wanted to make sure I asked you is where Washington has been at its best this season. It's rebounding on both ends of the floor, especially on the offensive glass, because like I said, Hannes Steinbach averaging a double-double has been one of the best players in the country this season. What is Purdue's plan in that regard for my Washington fans out there who might not know? Because, I mean, with Purdue being who they are, they should. But it's one of those things where I'm curious to see what that plan of attack might be, limiting on the offensive glass, especially.
Yeah, I mean, that's tough because it's what Purdue wants to do as well. So I think that both of these teams are going to be fighting for boards. And I think that's going to be a really big storyline going into this game is who can win the glass, because Purdue, since Trey Kaufman-Renn has gotten back, he was out the first 2 games of the year, but they just flat out have dominated on the boards with Oscar Clough coming in. The gravity that Clough brings you as a double-digit rebounder has really improved Trey Kaufman-Renn, where now TKR, he's averaging a double-double due to the gravity that Oscar Clough does bring on the glass. So with that 2-big lineup, it is really tough for teams to out-rebound Purdue. But like you said, Washington, a very good rebounding team. And the reason why I have a little bit of faith that even if Purdue does get out-rebounded, which I'm not positive they will, but going back to the Wisconsin game that was played on January 3rd, Purdue actually does get out-rebounded. And what I was really happy with is that they found another way to win. Even when they were getting out-rebounded, they started to force turnovers. They started to get those steals. The points off turnover differential was 19-8, which is a game-changing stat. That's the difference there when you're able to find different ways to win. And I think that's what Purdue is still trying to figure out at this point in the year. You're going to be in a good spot. So forcing turnovers is going to be big for Purdue in this game. Winning that turnover differential, that's going to be huge if they're not able to win on the glass.
No, I absolutely agree. And it's something where I think Washington's lost the rebound battle like 3 or 4 separate times this season. And one of the biggest things that I'm curious about is we did mention it earlier, but it's worth going back to, is the physicality of this game, because Washington's most frustrating loss of the year, I would say, and it certainly looks it's weird to say this. It looks better now after losing to Seattle University a couple weeks ago, and how that team played Gonzaga. I think that was last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever that might be. Is they certainly struggled with a team that is very well coached, can play really physical, and when calls weren't going their way, it was just one of those things where I don't want to say they crumbled, but they didn't rise to the occasion, which can certainly be really frustrating with the amount of talent that you have in this rotation. And in a game like this, where maybe there aren't going to be nearly as many foul calls as we saw the other night against Indiana, I want to see what Washington is able to do to try to overcome things like that. And it's why I highlighted 3-point shooting a little bit earlier, is that is one of the things that we haven't seen Washington be able to do on a consistent basis this year. They're in the bottom 3 in the Big Ten in converting from long range. And in a game like this, why I keep highlighting a guy like Kimari Peterson, or just some of these other guys, whether it be a Bryson Tucker, who certainly can shoot it from deep, and maybe somebody like Nikola Zupina gets in there a little bit and is able to do a little more in that regard. But I think that's where I'm most concerned with where these matchups against Purdue just kind of favor the Boilermakers. Is it's just they're such a well-coached and experienced team that's spent so much time playing together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very experienced. In terms of where I see Purdue losing another game. So we lose back to Iowa State this past month. But if Purdue is going to lose another game this year in conference play, it's going to be number 1 on the road, because I think this team is too experienced right now to lose at Mackey. Now, if a Michigan comes in, or if a Michigan State comes in, if they just outplay Purdue, there is the scenario for that. But Mackey is such an advantage that doesn't get talked about for Purdue, that with the experience group, I do think that that's going to be a big deal for Purdue in this game. But in terms of how they would get beat, it's going to be a team just out shooting them from 3, because we have seen some inconsistencies shooting the 3 ball for Purdue. I think if Purdue goes onto the road and if they just can't shoot the ball, another team does shoot the ball. That's something I saw against Wisconsin, but then Purdue forces them to only shoot 17% from 3. So That's kind of my concern surrounding this team, is that there's just going to be a sharp shooting squad. I don't know. I'll have to ask you. You say that Washington does struggle from that side of things. Do you think that Washington can outshoot Purdue from 3? And with that being said, how do you foresee this game going? Do you think it's going to be high scoring, low scoring? How do you think Washington tries to stay in this game at Mackey Arena?
A couple of great questions there. First of all, I am concerned about Washington being able to outshoot Purdue, because, again, it's just something we have not seen on a consistent basis this year. Again, the pieces are there. The talent is there, but probably because of the injuries and just the inconsistency in the lineup, we just haven't seen it yet. And it's really frustrating. And with this gauntlet coming up, because after Purdue, it's Ohio State on Sunday, then it's Michigan, then it's Michigan State, then it's Nebraska. That is just such a tough slate that things need to get figured out rather quickly. And I'm glad you highlighted what the environment is going to be like, because that doesn't make things any easier
for sure.
In this regard. I do think this is going to be a somewhat low scoring game. I think that when Washington is able to play with their two big lineup, they just feel a little bit more comfortable. And I don't necessarily know if Washington has the offensive firepower to hang with Purdue just yet. But I feel like this could be one of those games with some of the steps that we saw them take in the right direction in this game against Indiana in another hostile environment. They did rise to the occasion for a good majority of that game. They were down by 15. They were able to cut it to 4. And then you make a mistake here, you make a mistake there. All of a sudden, the lead is 9 again. There's 3 minutes to go. And it's, oh man, this one might be over. I think that Washington, again, has all the pieces, are able to put everything together. And I'm curious to see if it happens in this game, because it's just such a tough test with looking ahead as well. But I'm curious to get your take on that matter as well.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's where I want to go with this, is that I hope that we see Washington in a Big Ten tournament game. I do think that's a possibility. And by then, I think Washington will have a better shot at beating Purdue when they're more together, have played longer, have that better chemistry than what we've seen right now with guys in and out on a neutral floor. But just in this game, I think that Purdue is too intense. I think that they're too mature. I think they have more experience than where Washington is right now. You factor in Mackey Arena, and it's just tough for me to see a way where the Huskies come in and upset Purdue on their home floor. With that being said, I do think that this game will be rather low scoring. I think that Purdue, their offense will certainly shine, but it's going to be a game with both of these two big lineups determined inside, on the glass, in the paint. That's going to be the key to victory in this game. Not saying the Huskies can't do it, but I do think that Purdue is going to really limit them, their offensive production, and make it tough for them to get anything at Mackey Arena.
Oh, I love where you're going with that, because it's just something that I keep thinking about and I keep coming back to, is when Washington has been able, or when they've been forced, I would say, to find secondary options. It's fun to see how Hannes Steinbach can still respond, because he is so good on the offensive glass, and he is able to just give you so many second and third and sometimes fourth chances with how he rebounds the basketball. Denny Sprinkle likes to compare him to Dennis Rodman, which is just always fun to hear on the glass. But it's one of those things where in this game, and as I've talked about him, as I've written about him, it's, hey, this dude absolutely can be a lottery pick. He has all the talent in the world. This is one of those games where he can really step up and take his game to another level, because against Utah last week, he had 20 and 11. And Danny Sprinkle was like, I didn't think he played very well. I think he should have had 25 or 30 and 15 or 16 rebounds. And that's the level of talent that you're dealing with on the interior. But it's always about finding who else is going to step up and who is going to help him out. And again, I know I keep saying this, but it is really important to note the pieces are there. Everything else that you need for success is there, but it hasn't clicked yet. And I think that needs to happen very, very soon.
And we're going to figure out those answers tonight as Washington goes to Mackey Arena to face off against the number 5 ranked Boilermakers. That's all we got on today's Locked On Crossover. Thank you again to Roman for joining us. Purdue Huskies, it's going to be a fun one. Roman, let the Purdue fans out there know where they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to follow me on all forms of social media at rtomashoff34. Follow Locked On Huskies wherever you get your podcasts. And Nick, feel free to do the exact same for all my Husky fans out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Locked On Boilermakers, my first season here, so make sure you check out the show if you like Purdue basketball. On YouTube, anywhere you listen to podcasts, social media at Nick Arvin Sports. It's a pleasure to have you guys. And I always end off the episode saying boiler up, hammer down. But during these crossovers, I need to be inclusive. What do Washington fans say? Like, what is your thing?
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Okay. Okay. All right. And as always, boiler up, hammer down.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with our good buddy, Nick. Thank you so much to him for setting all that up. And let's see if Washington can pull off the upset at Purdue. That's all we got for you today on today's Locked On Huskies, though. So until next time, again, I always really do appreciate when you tune in. Thank you so much for doing that. And if you like what we have to offer here on the channel, please make sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, we're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So please make sure to click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post new show. Plus, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Thursday.